Rock stars of their time, Buffalo Bill and Pawnee Bill, made fortunes with their Wild West shows. But life for the cowboys, cowgirls, and Native American performers wasn't always caviar and fine whiskey. Or was it? Now, I've got an author I'd like you to meet whose book and insights will answer the question, what drove Lulu Bell Parr to spend 30 years riding broncos, become a true celebrated Wild West star, and end up in an unmarked grave? Stick around, because you're not only going to learn more about the book, you'll learn more about the writing journey this author took to create it.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is Diane Helentjaris. Join us as she shares the inspiration behind her book, along with her writing process, routines, and challenges. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Diane Helentjaris, ran away from her home in Ohio at age 11. She headed right to the Mennonite graveyard for a sunny snooze. Little did she know, a once famous bronco-riding cowgirl slumbered a few feet away in an unmarked grave. Discovering the cowgirl's story led to Diane's latest book, I Ain't Afraid, The World of Lulu Bell Parr. Happy to have you with us, and welcome to the show, Diane.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, you bet. Two questions. The first one you know is coming, and that is, let me hear how the book found you. I think we got a head start. Sounded like you were taking a snooze, but how did this book find you?
Well, Medway, my town where I grew up in, is unincorporated, small. When I was living there, I don't think we had a stoplight, okay? So maybe 400 people. And but it has a historical society, the Medway Area Historical Society, to kind of cover the local environment.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple years ago, the guy who does the Facebook post put something up about Lulu Bell Parr with a picture and said she was buried in the local graveyard. And I'm like, who the heck is that? And of course, I grew up, a lot of people in Western Ohio emphasize the Western and like the cowboys, the cowgirls, and I always wanted to have a horse, so that's how I got started.
Okay. And that's what I mean in terms of, I always had this dream of the show of a book finds you, because you don't just go looking for these things. They tend to sort of tap you on the shoulder.
Mhm.
Every author seems to have a story of, I was flying here, driving there, studying this, bumped into that. So now I got it. But when we opened up, I was talking about Lulu Bell Parr and becoming this Western star. How did she end up in an unmarked grave if she was such a big star?
Two things, the Depression, okay, and a change in what cowgirls were allowed to do. She was one of the early bronc riders. I think she started riding broncs around 1906, 1905. And periodically, people who ride broncos die riding a bronco. And she was injured multiple times. Well, there was a particularly tragic death of a cowgirl around I think it was 1929, one where the girl lingered for about 11 days and there'd be daily news updates, about how she was doing. So that got the public's attention. And that coincided that same year, the year of the crash on Wall Street. The cowboys who ran the rodeos were organizing the rodeos. There wasn't an official organization that ran them. And they cut down on the women's time in the events. And basically,
So much like a guy. Go ahead.
well, it was a competitive field.
Right.
And that's why, you ended up with women just doing barrel racing for the most part,
Right.
or rodeo queens for a while. That was about all they were allowed to do, and they didn't have any events. So there she was. She was like in her early 50s, and you couldn't get a job as a lady bronco rider. So she tried for years after to get more work, but between the Depression, so she went home to, well, it wasn't her home, but her brother lived in Dayton, Ohio. and she moved in with him. And he was married, and he had two stepdaughters, and they all lived together in Dayton and in abject poverty. He had been injured in a work-related job. They lived in a shack. It had dirt floor, no running water. And when she died, she had no money.
Hmm.
But she had been like that. She, after the early 30s, could not get work. And there are letters where she wrote Pawnee Bill, you know, begging for work at $35 a week and talking about how nice her Mexican sombrero was and all that. But there wasn't much going on in the Depression.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. I have a quick question for you. You know, as a kid, we always heard that, and you may know this or not know this, but I'm just throwing a Cowboys question at you. We always heard, oh, I want to be a cowboy. Cowboys, they're so good. But in fact, if you look at history, for a while at least, cowboys were not good. It wasn't good to be called a cowboy. You were basically a thief and a troublemaker. Was it the shows that shifted this around? I mean, when did cowboys become good again?
There was a lot of criminality in the
Hmm.
West, you
Right,
know,
right.
and a lot of the people who did this work were kind of misfits, outliers, and circus performers, because Lulu Bell was a Wild West performer and a circus performer, they're outliers as well. I think the change can be attributed to Hollywood. They built this mythology around the West. Charles Sirocco, I think that's how he says his last name, was a really cool cowboy who wrote hysterical biographies. And he had a lot to do with it, or the early cowboys.
Yeah. And I'll leave this cowboy thing, but obviously this is a topic that really interests me. Uh, I watched all the John Wayne movies and, the swashbuckling heroes and the cowboys. It was Deadwood from probably 20 years ago or when HBO ran a series called Deadwood that
Mhm.
really to me gave the first true look at how tough those times were and difficult and not everybody was wearing a fine suit and the women
Mhm.
weren't all in these beautiful dresses. It was a
Mhm.
very difficult time to survive. And I kind of wish the old westerns were a little bit more true to the honored the period that they were depicting because they really didn't.
Right. One little factoid that told it all to me in Lulubelle's story. Uh, One of the other cowgirls, and Lulubelle was not really a cowgirl. Okay, she was a performer who rode broncos. She didn't rope or well, I guess she did rope, but she wasn't truly a cowgirl. She didn't work on a ranch, although she lied and said she did. But they would go. And every night, the only way they cleaned themselves off was with a bucket until once a week they'd roll into a town and I forget, I think it was Pawnee Bill would spring for a hotel room and they could get a bath. So think about that, they're working outdoors all day, no AC, and they get a bath a week.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You didn't see that in the John Wayne movies. You know,
No,
yeah,
no.
everybody was nice and clean. All right, let's climb into your writing habits and style a little bit. This isn't your first novel, though. How many books have you written?
I've written some little books just because I wanted to,
Hmm.
but basically two. I did a historical novel, and this, of course, is an actual biography.
Right. Okay.
So,
And
so it was different. I wanted to make it factual.
okay. And so when you write, and certainly this one, I guess I have my answer. Do you start with a character and a plot and a theme, or do you sort of plot along and just kind of let it form itself?
I usually know the whole story
Hmm.
when I start. I
And do you
have,
outline it?
yes, I do. The historical novel, The Indenture of Ivy O'Neill, I found this book, which you've probably seen it, Save the Cat, and it was Save the Cat writes a novel or whatever. And I knew in America, well, culturally, all cultures have their way of telling a story. There are things that sell over here that do not sell in France.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, don't kill the protagonist like the French will do, because people won't take it. Like Summersby, that movie with Richard Gere. It was based on a French movie. They killed off Richard Gere. Not good. So I knew there were cultural ways to tell the story, and Save the Cat seemed to be a template.
Hmm.
And I honest to God did it just as part of a writing group to check out the template to see if it worked. And oh, they had the inciting incident. It was supposed to happen at 16 to 23% of the way into the book. And I would just mark all this stuff out and do it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but that is what I did with that novel.
Uh,
Uh,
well,
it,
no, we all have our own way. But I actually, and there's no right or wrong way, but I connect with people that obviously do it my way. Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm a guy that absolutely likes to see the whole thing in front of me. It's not that we don't deviate. It's not that I'll make tons of changes, but I want to see it. And I don't want to guess at where I'm going. And that allows me to answer a question I'm going to ask you. Uh, how do you know when it's worth pursuing? In other words, when you sort of laid it out there, could you see it and were you convinced this is worth doing, or did you not know that until you got, halfway through and saw where you were going?
it has to be a compelling story. And usually, when I'm writing something, I'm trying to answer a question, and I don't feel like I have to know the answer when I start. I don't feel like I have to be an expert on cowgirls when I start.
Right.
The first book, The Indenture of Ivy O'Neill, it had its origins in my own family's history. And the person that we knew about had been Irish, captured as a teen in Ireland, and kidnapped and brought to Maryland and sold for a hogshead of tobacco. And married the guy and apparently like the 1701, and then had a successful marriage. So my question for that book was, well, how the heck could that happen? How could you possibly have a successful marriage with some idiot who bought you for a bunch of tobacco? So that was what drove that story. And I knew the whole story was compelling enough to be worth telling,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then with Lulu Bell, she was beautiful and she was a star. Well, right there, most Americans will be sucked into wanting to know about that. We want to know why and how and all this. And when I started off, I thought she was going to be a flim-flam artist, just a braggart, that there was a lot of baloney, that she really didn't do those things that she was quoted as doing, or that people thought she did, that she did not meet the president of Argentina and get presents from him, that she didn't tour South America, but in fact, she did. So she turned out being a regular, decent Midwesterner to my surprise. So there you go,
Yeah.
And then my question was always like, um, why would she do that? Why would she was living in Steubenville, which is a real, okay, I'm not going to talk about Steubenville. She was living in Steubenville, and she was an Ohioan. She'd been born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, like a regular Midwestern, and she got divorced at 26 and runs off and joins up with the Pawnee Bill Wild West show. So that was a driver.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she sounds, it really sounds fascinating. And the fact that she's a female, really, to me, it kind of shrinks the pool a little bit,
Mhm.
of what you're writing to. And so I think that's really a good story, particularly for, little girls who, for me as a little boy, I didn't see any cowgirls really. And to your point, when I saw them, they were in dresses and they were going around barrels or something, but they weren't
Mhm.
doing the real cowboy stuff. And so I think it's really good that you bring a story like that to light. Let's talk about your writing routine a little bit. Um, what does that look like? A daily writing routine? Are you a daily person, a weekly person? How do you go about it once you cut the ribbon and start writing?
I try to match my activities to how productive I feel. So
Right.
there's a lot of stuff connected with writing that is you can do it with pretty low energy, or if you didn't sleep well, or if things like sorting through illustrations, captioning them. What do you call that kind of work? Um, you
I
know.
call that procrastination because,
Yeah,
but I know it's
exactly.
important. By the way, just real fast, everybody thinks when we say, "Oh, you're a procrastinator," that we've said something horrible to somebody. Listen, we have lots of tasks. Those tasks need to be done for the book. It's just
Exactly.
they will tend to sort of push away the other parts. And you said it well when you went, when my energy is low or whatever. Sometimes we're conning ourselves. We're not really admitting that our energy is low, and so we're doing those things. I think it's interesting. I'm gonna stop talking and give you the floor back, but I think it's interesting you're making the point that says there's productive things that need to be done. So why force the writing? You have other things to do, but they do get in the way of writing for me.
Oh, well, I don't feel that way.
Uh-huh.
Because I enjoy the creative part. So when I'm in the mood for that, that's what I do. The other thing that helps me is I'm in a really good writing group. Okay. I'm in the Maryland Writers Group, and that's a good group.
Good
Uh,
one. Good one, Diane. Very good. Keep going. A really good one. Yes.
but but I'm in a smaller group, and that's where I do my critiquing. Maryland, I do my organizational stuff and the activities and all that kind of jazz. But then I'm in a small group called the Hellenic Writers of Washington, D.C. And the critique group, and I'm Greek American, okay? One of my grandfathers was Greek, so that's how I get in, even though I don't speak Greek worth a darn. Since we meet regularly, and most of those people were not born in the United States, okay? They're immigrants and they have that immigrant mentality, like they work really hard and they're very serious. And so when we have our critique thing, you better be ready. So that helps spur me on. I better come up with 20 more pages of Ivy because I have to. So that helps to have scheduled um, responsibilities.
Right. Uh, Beautiful, by the way. A lot of people don't have a group like that, so they'll try and pair up with an accountability partner.
Mhm.
But isn't it interesting, Diane, that it's instinct versus logic? What you just presented is very logical. We get into a group, we get it, or as I'm throwing in, not a group, an individual, but we are accountable to someone or some
Mhm.
group. Logical. But our instinct is frequently is, I don't want to do anything like that because then I'm going to be held to this and we'll create all kinds of little stories. I wish more people would wear buttons that said, ask me about my book. I wish they would talk about it more because if nothing else, it forces us to get those 20 pages you just mentioned. Keep getting those 20 pages. If you do it in silence and quiet, it's a lot harder.
I don't really have writer's block, and I don't really have issues about I don't have trouble getting it done. And I'll tell you, like, writing is a relief with what's going on in the news. I've
Mhm.
substituted writing sessions sometimes now instead of the news. All right.
Yeah.
Um, so that's another thing. It's like a treat to write. I usually write a magazine article every month for a local magazine.
Yeah.
And the hardest part is that first part. I guess you'd call it a rough draft.
Hmm.
But I've kind of learned, and I think we obsess about the opening sentence and the opening part of what you're going to write. And sometimes you don't want to start because you feel like that has to be right. But now I've realized I've written enough that I just write whatever the heck, because often that first sentence is going to be buried down in the third page, and you end up moving things around. So,
Yeah.
so
Great,
that's
great.
helpful.
Yeah, great advice. Do you remember an actress named Mary Martin? She played Peter
Yeah.
Pan. I
Mhm.
had at Churchill High School in Potomac. I actually had Mary Martin's sister for my English teacher. And she gave me a wonderful piece of advice that mirrors what you said. We were all stuck on these topic sentences and all these, and you could take days to try and figure out how am I going to start this thing. And she was the first one who said, write the paper. Then go back. You can figure you're going to it'll probably change anyway. What I'm talking about, where I'm going, why I'm going there. So, but I will never forget that Ms. Martin really straightened me out on that one. And I'm with you. I really think you got to just tuck that football and go.
Mhm.
And that's when we write at our best anyway, when we're kind of unencumbered, at least me. How much time do you typically spend writing each day or week?
Oh, heck. When I'm deep into a book, like I would write probably no more than 5 hours a day. I'm trying to think. If I have a magazine article, I might write 6 or 7 hours on the last day, or I might just write an hour. I don't follow a strict schedule.
Do you follow
So,
a weekly schedule? In other
no,
words, and here's what I mean by that. I don't know whether I'm going to write an hour or 5 hours on Tuesday, but during this week, I'm going to get X amount of words down in this article or in this book. You don't do that either?
no, I mean, I hate to say it, and people ask me that, and I always say the same thing, and it's true.
Nothing wrong with that.
I go more by projects,
Yeah.
like when I have an article due, I know over a 2 week period, I set up the interview first because sometimes that leads to needing another interview or more work or changes what you think you're going to do. Or like the last one article, I had to get a book and read it, for
Yeah.
background. So I have like a project timeline. So I'm doing the indenture of Ivy O'Neill. I'm doing a sequel now. And I was thinking I'd get it done by St. Patrick's Day, but I got involved doing some other artistic stuff, another opportunity came up. So now I've moved it to maybe September, and I'll get it done by then. So I have those long-term schedules, but I
Yeah.
don't have a daily whatever.
Right. Do you allow that word maybe to be in that sentence there you just threw out there? I might maybe
Mhm.
have it done in September. You're okay with that?
Sure, sure.
Good. Look, you and I are like a frickin' frack here. I got to tell you, I try not to do that because it gives me wiggle room. And now, not always will I hit September or whatever, but I never write goals down with maybe. But that meant the whole idea of this show, so you know, is to
Mhm.
let people understand there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's a lot of ways, and we just have to stylize it around what works for us. And you and I are very similar in some areas and different in others. And that's to me what I find fascinating about talking to authors. I've been trying to pin you down on this. It's the last time I'm going to ask it, but I keep shifting the question around, see if I can get you. The most challenging part of the writing process for you is.
Ethics comes up,
Hmm.
okay?
Mhm.
Ethics comes up, and how things are going to affect other people's needs. So, for instance, with the biography of Lulu Bell, you don't want to be it's you have to be careful about other people's feelings, who might be involved. So it's not that I can't do it, but I'm saying that requires a lot of thought and energy. So the person that helped me a lot with the book about Lulu Bell Parr was a man from the local historical society, okay, did a lot of this research. And he lives in Ohio in that town where I grew up. And so, how to interact with him, he had access to a lot of information, not to be intrusive, not to do him wrong. And he's such a kind man. And he just died like a few weeks ago. I'm going back to Ohio for his service. How to do right by other people, I guess, is important as an author. And how to do right, like, let's say, with what you write, not to be graphically violent for no good reason or write about sex in a way that's not responsible
Right.
or to write for certain age groups. So those are the things that I think require that higher level of thought. Like, not that it's difficult, but you have to really think through.
Yeah. Agreed. How about the publishing and marketing side? What was your path to getting published?
Oh, well, when I wrote The Indenture of Ivy O'Neill, like I just did it because the Greeks didn't like this other thing I had worked on,
The
was
Greeks, those nutty Greeks. Okay.
yeah, they didn't really care for it. So I wrote this book, and they were like cheering me on, and some of them really liked it. And I thought, huh, I wonder if I should get it published. So, I mean, I wasn't writing it to publish it. I was doing it to check out the Save the Cat thing and have something to show up with for a critique session. So I knew of this woman in Australia who was a publisher who would give a manuscript appraisal. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe it's junk, maybe it's not. I'll send it off to Talia. So I sent it off to Talia, and she's like, oh, yeah, this is excellent. And I'll publish it. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So, so I did. So it was a hybrid publisher,
Mhm.
and I like doing that. I had in a previous life, I was a public health administrator. I'm a retired physician, and I like to pay attention to the money, how that worked. And when I did an assessment, okay, of like everything, I thought that was a good way to go.
Yeah. Now, I know the answer to this question, but see if you can do this in 30 seconds or less. Explain to people what a hybrid publisher is. Because we know there's more categories, but we've got conventional, we got hybrid, we got self. Tell people about what a hybrid is in your words.
A hybrid, everybody has skin in the game.
Uh-huh.
You pay part of the publishing costs up front, but and you don't get I always get that word wrong, but you don't get paid ahead of time
An
like you would
advance.
with the traditional. An advance. You don't get an
Uh-huh.
advance. So you don't have to earn your advance back. So let's say if the average advance is $2,000 and the average cost of getting a hybrid publication is $2,000. If you use a hybrid, you're going to pay $2,000 and then you're done. Okay. After that, if it makes money, you get the money. If you get an advance of $2,000 from if the money goes the other way, then you owe that to the traditional publisher until you earn back the 2000.
Right. Okay. Well said. And it's sort of like a cafeteria list. You can kind of go deeper into that hybrid or not, up to you in terms of some of the things that you want to add to that cafeteria tray that you're building. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
There's a lot of variation in
Right.
people's ethics and what they do, and so you have to be careful.
Yeah. Quite frankly, as a guy who's all my books right now are conventionally published. I've always felt that this whole advance thing is kind of ridiculous. It was really great in the 1940s when we're going to give you, Diane, this money so you can go to the fishing hut and survive for the next 3 months and write us that book. So thus the advance. Now it's kind of a clunky, it gets in the way. You're not going to see a dollar of royalty until you pay them back. So I'll tell you that for anybody who's going conventional, sometimes you can turn the tables a little bit and say, without using these words, rather than you just giving me my money back, so you're really not putting anything extra into this, give me no advance, conventional publisher, and let's split the costs of a publicist. Let's split some of the marketing costs. But publishers seem like they're doing you a big favor by giving you an advance, and they're basically just holding up your royalties till they get their money back. Uh,
Correct.
so they're just, thus the word advance. So it kind of, to me, I think it's a misnomer. People get it confused like it's some sort of bonus. It's coming out. One last question about the hybrid. Don't you, when you go with a hybrid, you get a higher percentage of royalty by
Yeah.
going with a hybrid? Okay. So there's another reason why if we can duplicate distribution, if we can duplicate marketing, everything that we get from a conventional, and we believe in our work, by going hybrid and basically sharing the risk of the project,
Mhm.
we get a much higher, and it is much higher. It's at least 2 times to 3 times higher than a conventional royalty would be, simply by believing in your book and sharing that risk factor up front. So, yeah, I think there's a big place for hybrids out there. Okay, cool. All right. Coming down the home stretch, let's talk about if you had some, and we have some aspiring writers that are most likely listening to this podcast. Okay, now walk your dog, but listen carefully to what Diane's about to say. What advice would you give to an aspiring writer? What would you tell them if you could tap them on the shoulder and say, look, I'll just give you one or two things, but really focus on these? We know there's more than two, but cherry pick one or two of what you would tell an aspiring writer.
Oh, I tell people to join a writers organization like the Maryland Writers Association. I would tell them to actually write and to not waste their money in competitions that charge you a reader's fee, especially when you're getting started, because it's too hard to sort them all out and it's a loser thing. Go, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you said that because it's so tempting and it's, not all of them are bad. We both know
Mhm.
that. But sometimes it's hard to figure out which one is kind of the scammy one, and where we're really all going to get prizes now. And which one's legitimate award? Yeah, my wife is an artist, and these types of companies and processes, they feed on artists as well, to pay this, get an assessment, and maybe win an award and things like that. And
Right.
I would so much rather people protect whatever budget they have for that book and put it into some marketing efforts. Because there's plenty of ways to spend money to market a book. So I'm with you. I think that's almost not always, but a little bit of a vanity move sometimes. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, when you first
Mhm.
start out, there's plenty to do where you don't have to pay readers' fees while you're getting your feet wet and figuring out who's legit and who's not.
Yeah. All right. Last question for you. We're all evolving. Has your writing or the process that you follow, has it evolved over time? And if so, what are a couple of things that you find yourself doing now that maybe you didn't do, some years ago when you're writing?
Sure. I believe I give myself the license to be more poetic in my writing. I get good feedback for that. People like it. And so I have my own style and I don't feel intimidated, you know. I
Yeah.
did a lot of like scientific writing or organizational writing, which is very dry, you know, when I dry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what I do now, you know, I can be a little more poetic and that's fun.
Yeah,
And I like,
isn't it nice? Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't even thought about it, but some of the first writing I ever did was RFPs, proposal writing, things like that. And that was writing, the technical writing. It's so
Mhm.
nice when we can cut it loose a little bit. How do people get a hold of you, Diane?
My website, which is just my name, which is hard enough.
Oh, this is tough. Now get ready, everybody, and go nice and slowly.
So it's www and Diane, Diane, Helentjaris,
Got
HELentjaris.com.
good.
So you can always just Google me to see how to spell my name because I'm the only person with that name
Yeah.
and it'll show up.
Right. If you throw two-thirds of the consonants and vowels in the English language at her last name, she'll come up. So,
Exactly.
okay. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for letting me get a couple of as you can see, I was sort of feeling out some things early on, but I admire the writing you do. And so I felt it was a safe space to talk to you about a couple of things. And I do love the fact, I wish more people would understand that I love a show where we disagree and where one person has one way and with the other, because it just keeps reinforcing to everybody who's got this dream. There are some best practices for sure, but then let style take over, because at the end of the day, we're looking for a book. And sometimes that's hard to do it somebody else's way. We all have our own way. You have your way, I have my way. My way's a little better. Just kidding. And but anyway, Diane, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.
Thank you.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also hear a brief history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to episode 0.